Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of State of Cybercrime. We are super, super excited to have you here today. Let's crack right into it. We're going to go over our usual segments today. We're definitely going to cover some good news, as there does seem to always be some good news these days worth talking about. We'll jump on into the danger zone. We'll talk about some threat actors and some attacks that you should be aware of. We'll talk about a few vulnerabilities. And if I could get a drum roll, please. We've got a brand new segment today called AI Vey, and I bet you guys can guess what that's going to be about. Hint, hint, it's AI. And as always, we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So please stick around, as we're always interested in getting feedback from our audience and doing a little Q&A at the end. So for those of you that are tuning in for the first time, we always like to kick off the show with some good news, as often cybersecurity is seen entirely as doom and gloom. And there are a few good things to say. David, why don't you start and tell us about them? What's going on with the pirates?
Well, we've had some dismantling of the pirates. There is or was an IP TV network that was distributing or streaming illegal content via subscription. This is, when I read this, I thought, boy, piracy has really come a long way from when people were bootlegging VHS tapes and things like that, and Napster. And it's one thing to do one video, but to have a whole subscription service that was doing multiple channels, streaming video that was looks like it was basically siphoned off people's set-top boxes. I thought this was way bigger, and in addition to having the arrests made from a whole bunch of people that were involved in this operation, there were some interesting assets seized as well. About $1.7 million, 35 servers, 55 computer systems, and an Audi A7 luxury car. And so it made me wonder if they were streaming The Electric Company or Sesame Street. For those of you remember, like, one of these kids is doing his own thing, right? Or one of these things is not like the other. But DeVere, I know, had an interesting take on the main developer for this. Was that DeVere? You've been tracking this fellow for a while?
So I've been tracking a guy who is responsible to a different type of operation, but it's basically the same type of activity. What they usually do, Matt, if you can just click. What they usually do is getting tons and tons of setup boxes, as many as they could, and turning each setup device to a different channel, and then taking the output from an analog device back to re-encoding it as a digital signal, and then resharing everything as an accessible service and paid service. In that sense, I've been tracking a developer for the past 4 years, something like that, who is responsible for maintaining and managing one of these platforms. This is his actual resume from LinkedIn. So this is 100% real, and you can see exactly what type of challenges he has been facing when it comes to technical difficulties and managing the team and scaling up the operations, and again, developing their own custom code systems in order to maintain operational capabilities while making sure everything is smooth as possible, while trying to generate revenues as much as possible. Now, without even getting to the... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so wait a second. We're not looking at someone's resume who's like a real developer. They're a hacker developer? Yes. Or maybe both?
So this is kind of an interesting bit, because, again, he was operating from Eastern Europe, and he was absolutely 100% knew that he was, again, doing copyright infringement. But when it comes to the actual development and what is their work is that project was quite a long and extensive project in that specific platform and site, which is still operating today, which is still being targeted by law enforcement worldwide, taking down domains and whatnot. And this actually shows us exactly how do they operate. Now, we're talking about trying to charge customers with between $40 to $50 a month. Like, it's not even pay-per-view. It's like actual 100% VOD, which you can watch as any film or series as you want, wherever, whenever. So it's just that. It's just crazy. And I think this was kind of a very good glimpse for me, even to understand exactly what he was doing. Not even to talk about the nerve of actually posting it on his LinkedIn profile.
Sure. Now, that wasn't the only bit of good news that we have. It also looks like that the Mozy botnet has gotten disrupted. Now, for those of you that haven't heard of the Mozy botnet, it's known for distributed denial of service attacks, primarily on IoT devices. It went active in August of 2023, following what appears to be the activation of a kill switch. So how Mozy worked is they targeted IoT devices that either were running vulnerable code or had weak passwords, and then created a decentralized BitTorrent DHT network with all those zombie computers. There was a large amount of infections in Asia, predominantly in India and China, and it appears as though on September 27th, a UDP message got sent to all the bots ordering them to terminate. Now, rumors on the internet, thus unconfirmed to date, suggest that maybe Chinese law enforcement actually cooperated with the founders of Mozy to bring the botnet down, but at least we have some more good news.
Yeah, and there is some speculation also that it could have been done by the malware actors too, right? Because there is some evidence of persistence, right? They're kind of set up. I think it pings a remote server, right, as well. So it I guess time will tell whether it's actually good news or not. Maybe a little ambiguous.
Sure. Now, I know that that's probably not the only thing that people were hoping to hear about in this good news segment, but we moved the next story to the danger zone, David. And I kind of thought like this was going to be good news and this was going to fit in the good news segment. But like, first of all, like, I mean, a lot's going on with the SEC charging the SolarWinds CISO with fraud. Why is it in the danger zone and what's going on there?
Well, I think it's another one of these ambiguous. Is it good news? Is it bad news? Maybe a little bit of both. I'm not sure. I read through the complaint against the CISO, and it doesn't. I wouldn't describe being a CISO as an easy job. If anybody wants to chat in, if we have some CISOs that would disagree with that, please feel free to chat in and correct me. But in general, I think CISOs are up against a lot, and they have a lot of pressure. This kind of, if I was a CISO now, I'd probably be looking for some insurance potentially as well. I read through the complaint. I think that the SEC has indicated that they may not be done. They may go after other executives, but the complaint really says the CISO knew and didn't do enough to notify on what was going on there and potentially misled investors. If I read the complaint correctly, and I was curious. Go ahead.
David, there were a couple of things I took away from it. One was around this joke that everyone keeps talking about, right? That there was some emails exchanged, flying to maybe the humorous nature of the state of security. And so what it seems like at least from my perspective, again, as outsider reading in, it seems like that this acknowledgement of the low resiliency by multiple parties is sort of the thing that if it was such common knowledge, why didn't the board know? And then thus, why didn't investors know? As I think about this, it's a statement from the SEC. This is just my opinion, but it's a statement from the SEC that that's not okay, and that in a vacuum I agree with. We do need to forget about the greater security community knowing that, but I do think a company's board of directors should know how fragile the thing at which makes them money might be. And I think that's my takeaway, though. It is, I mean, the CISO role is a tough role. I mean, we look at what happened with the Uber breach and the charges that came out of that related to kind of what looked like a cover-up. We covered that on a recent Data First forum, blockbuster breaches. I wonder if our marketing co-hosts wouldn't mind dropping a link in the chat for anyone that wants to check that out. But the thing that it brings back to the forefront is, is this CISO role almost have a higher calling than just the board? Is there more to that role, unlike any other? Is there some higher ethics that they have to adhere to? Because I everyone's quick to say they shouldn't have done that, but then what do you do instead? Like what would you have wanted this person to have done is my question.
Yeah, and I read through the 10K, which from 2019, and that was standard language. Now that in 2019, it was when they had been breached, but they didn't know it yet, right?
Yep.
So,
they didn't know how bad. They just knew that something had happened.
And then I also read through the complaint a little bit, and one of the things that it cites is an email that Brown wrote that says it was very concerning that the attacker may have been looking to use SolarWinds Orion software in larger attacks because our backends are not that resilient, which seems like a warning to me, right? So if like it's sort of, I guess I'm really curious to see how this plays out. Like what was he supposed to do? Like I looked for investor conference transcripts to see if he had like spoken anywhere else. I didn't find any there, but I think you're dead on, Matt, right? What is the guidance? What are you supposed to disclose and to whom? And then, of course, misleading after the breach. I think that's a big part of it. And I
that's
almost
fraud.
wonder whether that was
just like covering it up, it's fraud. I'm not one to say it's not. If a hacker says, "Pay me some money," and you say, "Yeah, but if you do it over here, nobody finds out about it," that's a cover up, right?
Yep,
like
absolutely.
If you have a SolarWinds style incident and you go, it's a business email compromise. It's not a big deal. It's one intern, one password, right? That would also be misleading, But I think it's, time's going to tell here. Now, that wasn't the only thing worth mentioning in the danger zone. Now, some people believe that Hive is back and has re-emerged as Hunters International. And it seems like every episode, we announce the continuation of the never-ending game of whack-a-mole that is played with rebranding cybercrime rings. Today, it's Hive re-emerges from hibernation. Bottom chick, this was a David Gibson goat. How did I do? As Hunters International. Anyway, researchers found a significant code overlap between samples from Hive and samples from Hunter, though these allegations are denied by Hunters International because all they're saying is, well, yeah, but we purchased the encryptor source code from Hive, but we're not Hive. This is not a rebrand. And the question I ask is, like, does it really matter? Because for the first victim to Hunters International in the UK, which was a school that had student data exfiltrated and encrypted, everything appended with this new .locked extension. I don't know that they care if it was Hive or Hunters International. It's just cybercrime striking a den, and definitely a new variant that people should be concerned about.
Absolutely. It's like you said, whack-a-mole. It seems like the same actors keep coming up.
Now, just like we play whack-a-mole with different threat actors, it seems like there are a handful of applications that get these mass exploits in vulnerabilities. And one of those is Citrix. What's going on there, David?
Yeah, so the NetScaler, the ADC and gateway services, which are used for remote access, I think to Zen desktop and Zen app environments mostly, which are, kind of like virtual desktop, I guess, in some ways. The couple vulnerabilities there, these are internet facing. And this was interesting because there were a combination of vulnerabilities, but one of which allowed the attackers to steal session cookies from memory. And that meant that they could use those cookies to log in, right, and kind of bypass any authentication. Then after that, there were more vulnerabilities, if I'm understanding correctly, for them to implant a backdoor, and then use this like any other compromised host on the environment. But one of the things that I think made this really, really tough was the cookies would survive the patching. Right. So in other words,
if you had a hijacked session,
session fixation.
Yeah. So they basically came in and says you have to kill all active and persistent sessions in order to protect yourself from this. So it sounds like, Devere, maybe, like it sounds like some people missed that step.
Yeah, so generally speaking, Citrix has been targeted over and over and over since the end of 2019. If you remember the famous R3 that allowed threat actors to massively scan and exploit Citrix gateways, ADCs in scale. Generally speaking, from that moment on, Citrix became the target of continuous vulnerability exploitation in scale, and that is the case as well over here. When it comes to session fixation, that is the term for when the cookie or the session itself is not being expired after a certain amount of time, or when you try to manually try to kill the session basically from the server. However, it allows continuous access and invalidation to the cookies themselves as long as you don't do it. So it's like giving the threat actors the key, but still unable to change the logs in that sense.
Yeah.
So what can you do?
And
yeah.
I think like first of all, we all had that aha moment at the same time. I wonder if half the audience did too. Like we all realized, oh man, that means all those, invalid tokens are still valid. But we come across this a lot when we're helping our clients investigate incidents in Office 365. They'll think that they got a user who was compromised, and they'll say, oh, well, we've reset their password. And I'm like, awesome. Did you kill all the active sessions? Well, no. Well, and then you got to explain this concept of tokenization, especially in SaaS apps, where you get this token, this authentication token that has a time to live, and it's good unless you invalidate that token. Doesn't matter, what necessarily changes from a user profile perspective. And this is across all SaaS apps. But guys, that wasn't the only vulnerability from another app that gets commonly exploited. I mean, we have to mention the fact that Confluence, yet again, has a pretty big vulnerability, making some pretty big news. If this is the first that you're hearing of it, you should definitely patch CVE 2023-22518, as this bug in Confluence Data Center and Confluence Server could lead to data loss and destruction of data. And this is especially true if you have publicly accessible instances of Confluence. It's super, super important that you upgrade those right away. And if you can't, that you use mitigations like backing things up, blocking off internet access, other forms of segmentation, as this vulnerability is being actively exploited. So just like the one on Citrix, if it's not abundantly clear to you guys that you should patch Citrix and Confluence now, you probably should. And that'll bring us to our final segment of today, and our brand new segment, our newest segment, AI Vey. Though I'm sure many of you are tired of hearing anyone say anything related to AI, and you're probably all going, AI Vey, yourselves. We will cover the good, the bad, and the ugly happenings as it's related to AI and our eventual demise to our robot overlords. Anything you want to add about this segment, David?
I'm just really excited to add a new segment here. I'm really excited for the bumper that our AV team is going to put together as well.
Yeah, we got it, because this isn't cool enough. AV team, if you're watching, like, we need animations, we need like sound effects. Anyway, I'm sure our audience is thinking the same. So the President of the United States, President Biden, issued an executive order that is laser focused on AI. They set new standards for AI safety, security, privacy, equal access to AI, and even civil rights. The specifics of the executive order direct agencies to take actions to build developer tools, share test results, work with government entities, create standards, and even ensure AI systems are both protecting America's privacy and in bolstering our commanding presence and strength from a national security standpoint. The order aims to promote innovation, competition, and American leadership in the AI space while emphasizing the role of a responsible government in oversight of things like AI. Now, I got to admit, I like what I'm reading. The balancing of safe, governed AI with using AI to bolster our workforce and our national security, at least here in the US, like these are the things I hope we do. So I didn't see a whole lot of bad. Obviously, with the great power comes great responsibility. We don't want too much government overreach and oversight that leads to increasing cost and lack of access to innovation. But at least at the forefront, it doesn't look like that's what we're getting into.
Yeah, there's also investment, right? Too. It makes sure that there's funding for innovation and AI. I think there's more funding like than the next 7 countries combined in the U.S. and so there's aspects of kind of going further with AI, but also making sure that we can filter out the AI generated content from the real content. There are a lot of potential abuses of AI as well that
Yeah,
it's good that
it's
we're
good we're
starting
trying
to
to,
at least look at.
yeah, do some controls, and it's good that the U.S. isn't the only one trying to do it. Well, what's going on there? There's a summit in the UK to tackle AI.
Yeah, I read about this and it's an interesting topic, I think. And we with AI, there's so much we don't know and so much we don't understand. I think there's so much potential, if we, look at sci-fi, there's also so much, potential for destruction. And it reminded me of, okay, well, if a group of leaders are going to come together like in this and start to talk about how do we mitigate some of the risks of AI and do AI safely, what did we do in past innovations like with and I first went to nuclear bombs and said, okay, when was the first treaty there? And it looks like August 5th, 1963. It took 8 years of difficult negotiations, but there was finally the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and
And
that
what
led me
about
to
space exploration? That was the other big one, right? Where we
yeah.
agreed we weren't going to colonize and shoot each other from space.
Well, that actually was more interesting, I thought, and actually like a better comparison in some ways, because with nuclear bombs, nuclear power encompasses a lot of potential for good, positive stuff, but with space, it's a little bit more unknown, kind of like with AI. And it led me to a really interesting piece out of the University of Cambridge by Verity Harding. And we can put the link in the chat to it if people are interested in it. But the treaty was created in 1967 to exactly what you said, is to kind of make space exploration the province of all mankind, and to kind of get a handle on it. Now, of course, that treaty with all the satellite stuff that's going on, I think is starting to be a little bit like it needs some updates. Those space treaties as well. But I guess I'm curious, if we asked our listeners, do people think AI is as transformative as space exploration and nuclear power? And feel free to chat in, more or less or no or whatever. But be curious to see what the audience thinks. And I think in the end, if AI is going to be transformative, that we're going to need to start having the conversations about it. I think it may take a long time to figure out a treaty or figure out what we can all agree to. And I just hope that it doesn't take too long so that we're not negotiating a treaty with like an AI entity itself.
Yeah, it's interesting, David. I'm going to take the bait on your question, and I want to echo a concern from Eric in the chat. I'd have concerns from Eric over censorship and generative AI leading to government propaganda that might exclude valid information. And from Cliff, AI could be that transformative. I keep coming back to that Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. As I think that one's going to get a standing test of time. Probably didn't actually come from Spider-Man now that you think about it. But that's where it got famous for me, at least, with Peter Parker. And I do think that AI will be able to transform how we think about and work with computers in the same way that nuclear energy can transform the energy market. I do feel like AI will have the power to be as devastating as nuclear warfare would be. If I think all those movies, the robots become self-aware and they start to make decisions and they're not upheld by a moral code. I think that those are real risks. I mean, what if we start to depend on them for defense decisions, and they decide that we're the threat, just like in Terminator. Carmen Cody says that might already be happening,
Yeah.
and that's why we say AI Vey, right?
I go ahead, Tabir.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think boundaries should be set, standards should be met. I think as the industry keeps on pushing hard forward in every type of company that starts using AI for any sort of reason, I think legislation is a must. And again, I agree that it's transformative, but legislation and setting the boundaries and asking ourselves the question of what is allowed and what is wrong in the sense of using AI, and it's up to the government itself, or of course the boundaries to be set in order to make sure that everything is aligned and no power could be used for nefarious reasons and purposes. So.
And we heard from Michael. Michael, I believe AI is more transformative for the masses than space exploration, at least today. Maybe together even they're exponential. Oh, I think about that, AI and space exploration. Like if we had an AI-enabled space exploring drone, that could be pretty powerful. And
it was powered by nuclear power.
Yeah, and it's either Ali or Ali. I hope that's okay. It's as transformative, except it is more difficult to track or monitor, unlike nuclear and space exploration, where there's a lot more physical artifacts. That's a great point. It does have a lot of opportunities to go unmonitored or unsupervised. Yeah. So go ahead, David.
I just, that is one danger I really see is, it's we stop being able to tell what's true. AI generated responses, right? There was an interesting article about how they hallucinate, right? And there's a percentage of the data that isn't valid. And if we start to believe AI, no matter what, lose the ability to really question it or have any kind of recourse to the responses, then it just reminds me of Agent Smith saying, it's like when you allowed us to start thinking for you, it really became our civilization, and that's dangerous.
And some closing thoughts here from Ginger and Scott or Stuart. Are the government entities reaching out to those that have the most knowledge to make the legislation make the sense? This is usually the gap between the legislators and those with the knowledge. And our closing comment from Scott. Scott, I like this one. He who controls the remote to the TV controls what we watch. And I think that'll be a wrap for today's episode of State of Cybercrime. A big shout out to the co-hosts, David and Devere. And to our audience, you guys are what make the show possible. So we appreciate it. We hope you tune in live for our next episode as soon as we have one to share. Thank you guys so much.